Today, we welcome to Global Citizenship Education Interview Series Dr. Chen Jit Ern. Dr. Chen Jit Ern is the director of the Jeffrey Sachs Center on Sustainable Development and an associate professor in the School of Biological Sciences at Sunway University in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. His primary research interest is in the development and the utilization of genetic engineering techniques and molecular tools on various microalgae to study the underlying mechanism of psychological threats such as lipid accumulation and heat tolerance. Other areas of interest include the effects of algae auxins on the growth of algae plants, monitoring biodiversity in Bandar Sunway, and advising Sunway Group on their sustainability initiatives. So welcome, Chen Jit, to the Global Citizenship Education Interview Series. It's a pleasure to welcome you here.
Hello, thank you very much, Dr. Bosio.
So you come from a biological sciences background. However, as the director of the Jeffrey Sachs Center at Sunway University, you do look into sustainability, ethical issues, and perhaps even concept of global citizenship. So my first question is a challenging one, is a direct question, but how does your work as the director of the Jeffrey Sachs Center connects to notions of global citizenship?
So the idea behind the center as it stands today in the Jeffrey Sachs Center is that we wish to develop the baseline information that would guide future action in terms of what kind of decisions are the priority that need to be made by various stakeholders of society. At the moment, in terms of the primary stakeholders that we are targeting, they tend to be relatively local, but as a subset of this decision making, these questions or these findings would be applicable to the global citizenship as well. And one example I can give you is the idea of, it's a fairly straightforward statement to say that communities that are of low elevation near coastlines are at risk of sea level rise. That's a straightforward statement. But what is to be done about that? Aside from the idea of mitigation, right? So then if you move to the idea of adaptation in the meantime, what do you do or what do you propose about how to resolve this issue? That is a question that local citizens as well as global citizens will have to grapple with at various levels of society. And that's the kind of work, or at least the kind of questions that we aim to resolve as a research center.
So I want to get a little bit deeper into the initiatives and projects undertaken at the Jeffrey Sachs Center that promote sustainability and fostering global citizenship. On the one hand, because here is the focus is on global citizenship education, but beyond that, we look at sustainability initiatives. We want to also discuss global citizenship as an ethical platform. And so I wanted to understand a little bit better your initiatives at the Jeffrey Sachs Center, and how would you connect that to notions of global citizenship?
Right. So the part about our program or about our work that's truly global would probably be the education side of things. So I've just given you a very short statement of what we do research-wise. But as I said, that part is fairly local. The global element of our work would be the education program that we run. So we have a Master's in Sustainable Development Management that we run under the guidance of Professor Jeffrey Sachs himself. Now, the aim of this program is to be able to cascade down information and knowledge about sustainable development concepts at the managerial level of corporations. So if I may describe what I mean by that. Sustainable development obviously has many subfields and subcomponents. What I'm referring to, or what the program that we run in terms of our education system, what our program specifically is targeted for, is the idea that in our corporate structures today, there is a lot of demand for further qualification in the form of MBAs, right? And our theory is that, well, one thing that we could do to improve the situation is to have not to say a replacement, but a alternative to MBAs that fulfills the requirements of managerial responsibilities or duties, but also has an emphasis on the questions of sustainability and operations that will become more and more integrated into various systems as we go forward. So to give you an example, it has become, at least in several countries in Southeast Asia, a common practice to integrate not just financial reporting into company statements, but also sustainability reporting. In the West, you may refer to it as ESG reporting, if you will. Now, I know that's a bit of a controversial topic on the one hand, but sticking to the idea of being able to report not just the financial activities of a company, but also the general sustainable indicators of a corporation or of an organization. That is what we aim to educate individuals on. So, and that program, because it's education, it's deployed worldwide. There's no need for individuals to come to our facility or our institute in Malaysia. It can be done wherever you are online through open distance learning. But the accreditation or the certification comes from a bona fide university in Malaysia, recognized by the Malaysian government. So that's the thing with regards to global citizenship. That's our contribution. That's our main contribution so far. The idea that we can at least provide a better grounding for individuals who wish to understand not just the details of sustainability reporting, not just the checklist, but why the checklist exists.
Right, right. So the way, if I understand correctly, also to translate this to our audience, is a way to encourage individuals to contribute to the life of a corporation, not only from a financial point of view, from a sustainability point of view. And so in order to do that, you need to be able to translate concepts of sustainability and ethics into concrete steps.
Our concern is people look at these reporting requirements and they see it as compliance, only through this lens of compliance. And what we want to do is to train people to understand that behind these requirements is ideally a scientific basis or scientific reason why that reporting exists. So let me give you an example. So the idea of carbon emissions reporting, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, right? On the one hand, we get requests as consultants to help companies measure their emissions. But what we provide, in addition to the numbers or the figures, what we plan to do when we talk to these organizations is why they are doing this. Why is it important that the emissions are being measured and how they're being measured? Right. And for that example, the idea is, well, in order for you to understand where best to reduce your emissions, you need to first understand where your emissions are coming from. So as a corporation, you may not realize which component of your supply chain or which component of your manufacturing process is the one that is, quote unquote, causing the most environmental damage. We're defining environmental damage in this case as carbon emissions, right? So the idea here is not to see the reporting process as something you have to do for reporting, but to see the reporting process as the first step in identifying where best to put your efforts into reducing your impact on the environment. So that idea it sounds fairly straightforward, after saying this, but you'll be surprised at the number of times where we inform this to managers and then a light bulb goes off in their head to say that, it's not just about ticking off a checklist. The idea behind the checklist is to give you an insight into the low-hanging fruits that each individual, each corporation will need to carry out in order to eventually reduce somewhere or somewhat the amount of, in this case, emissions that they are producing.
Yeah, yeah.
In the long run, to hit targets in the long run. Yeah.
So let me ask you another couple of questions based on our interesting conversation here. So in what ways do you believe fostering global citizens contribute to achieving sustainable development goals on a global scale based on the work you're doing at the Jeffrey Sachs Center, the master's program that partially you described, and more broadly also based on your experiences?
Yeah. So the big problem that certain localities face is exposure. A big problem that we have at a global scale is that climate change doesn't hit everyone equally. I think that's a fairly obvious statement to make. Some places in the world will suffer more than others. Some places in the world will suffer sooner than others. And the place where fostering global citizenship comes in is that if you see the world primarily through the lens of your local community or your local nation, the idea that climate change is a big problem is not equal among these various localities or communities. And that leads to a situation of inherently, injustice, right? To use the term, there will be, climate change is inherently an unjust outcome of
Particularly global north and global south. So we're
Exactly,
developing
right.
a developed country. Yeah. Yeah.
So the idea here is that you want to be able to foster this community or camaraderie of a global citizenship in order to better espouse the idea that we are all in this together, that the actions of one end of the world matter to actions on the other end of the world, even if these things are not connected directly, right?
Yeah.
So how would we develop this as part of the JSC? We are a small-ish organization. We are not the UN, for example. And even at the UN, they have trouble, as Jeffrey Sachs has mentioned multiple times. Getting 50 individuals to agree on one thing is difficult. Getting 50 nations to agree on one thing is even worse. But it has to be done, right? The effort has to be made. And so, at least in our institute, the idea here is to be able to push for what are the unifying questions or unifying problems that everyone can at least agree to as a starting point. You may not always get the most pertinent problem to be solved, agreed upon, but the least you can do is to get something that everyone can at least agree upon as a problem to solve.
Absolutely.
And in a way, that would foster, hopefully, the idea that, well, we need to start the process of eliminating certain things or compromising on certain things in order to guard the welfare of the entire community.
Absolutely. And this ties with the final question. And be prepared is a challenging one. And the question is, what are the three keywords defining global citizenship, education, and why the three keywords?
Three keywords. Okay.
Three keywords, yes.
For me, I guess the first question is about, the first keyword would be about access. The thing about the assumptions of global citizenship, education in this particular case, or in general, this global citizenship idea, is really, really a subset of the internet era that we live in, right? The idea that we can communicate across national boundaries in real time for almost free. This is a fairly recent capability or invention, right? And there are still many parts of the world that are not connected. Their access to information, their access to communication, right, is still fairly restricted or expensive or difficult. And so the definition one of the key words for global citizenship is access to these systems, or I'm going to use the term the internet, right? It's not just the internet, but I'm going to use the term the internet to explain everything.
Access to new technologies, particularly those related to communication and education. Yeah, that's a very good statement, particularly because in the global south, they do not have such access, at least not that easily, right?
I mean, it's not just the communications, it's electricity. So if you want to go further still, there are still parts of the
basics.
world.
Yeah, that's right.
So that would be the first thing, access. And the second, I would say, the second keyword would be, I'm looking for a good keyword for this, but the way I would describe it is abundance. And the reason why I use that term is referring to the idea of, in order for you to have a sufficient interest, right, of the greater world around you, you must first have sufficient resources locally for your day-to-day needs. And that is something I feel personally is forgotten many times in the halls of power where these conversations happen. And when I say abundance, I don't mean everyone needs to be a millionaire. That's not what I mean by that. What I'm referring to is the idea of, if your day-to-day life consists of very local, very personal struggles for survival, for food, for shelter, for the requirements of life, the idea, this idea of all of us being in this together, of global citizenship as this concept, is a very academic one. Right? This global
difficult to translate in their day-to-day life. Yeah,
yes,
that's right.
So you need to have a certain level of living standards, or that's why I use the term abundance, in order for one to aspire to the ranks of global citizenship. So
although I believe that one of the merits of discussing global citizenship is exactly this, that we bring back on the table discussions about how to connect local and global issues, so that there is more interest in both on the local level and the global level. But you're right. I mean, the struggle for daily living is that strong that people really challenge themselves to grasp what does it mean to be a global citizen in this context. Although we are not talking about, and I always mention this in my conversations, publications, and so on, I'm talking about a concept that is disconnected from the local issues and the life of people living in the local community, at least as it is described in my conversations and publications. But it's good that you highlight this. And the third one, what will be the third one?
So this one will be a bit more controversial, and this is where I guess AI is going to change things. It's language.
Language.
One of the things that gets underestimated when we talk about global citizenship is the assumption that we all speak effectively English.
Yes.
And it's sort of something that gets underestimated, that the internet, so to speak, right? A huge chunk of it is English dominated. A lot of the conversations that refer to this idea of global citizenship is referring to this Anglosphere. Obviously, China is a big player. They have a large Mandarin-speaking population, but both through their own efforts, because they have their own, the Chinese firewall, for example, the Great Firewall of China. So they have their own ecosystem, and in some ways that prevents them slightly. Or it depends on how you see it, right? Obviously, for them, we can't join. It's harder for us to join their brand of online citizenship or global citizenship, because they use different apps from us. They use different programs from us. They don't have access to the kinds of shared communication channels that people assume would be part of a global citizenship sphere, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that's one thing. The primary principle I'm talking about is the language itself can be a barrier.
Language diversity, yes. I mean, in academia as well, is English dominated, so as a reflection of society.
Yeah.
On the one
And
hand.
that in that case, the question of whether we would come to a world where translation becomes automated and instantaneous, that could change things similar to the way that the internet, fast communication, has changed, has enabled globalization. So where I'm getting at is the internet has enabled, or fast communication, I want to use the term, has enabled the concept of global citizenship to be more than just a niche for well-traveled, wealthy individuals, right? And the advent of automated, fast, instantaneous translation may drive a second round of global citizenship, whereby the vast populations of individuals who do not, for whatever reason, know English can therefore start to participate in this citizenship process.
Absolutely.
Using their native language.
So we have access, abundance, and language as the three keywords. Very interesting discussion with Dr. Chen Jit Ern, the director of the Jeffrey Sachs Center on Sustainable Development and associate professor in the School of Biological Sciences at Sunway University. Thank you very much. It was a lovely and interesting and very wide-ranging, I would say, conversation on global citizenship and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emiliano.